Gestalt has never fit into the dominant paradigm. And so I would suggest that Gestalt, in and of its ethos and its character, is wonderfully queer.
We record this podcast on Gadigal land in Sydney and pay our respects to all First Nations elders, healers, and storytellers. As therapists, we recognise the wisdom that lives in land, body, and spirit, as well as the queerness that runs through nature's veins. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to the Gestalt Me Gently podcast. This is two queer-affirming Gestalt psychotherapists exploring what it means to be a therapist, talking about queer identity, and also exploring some of the cultural zeitgeists that are happening in this here and now moment. But today we have a special guest with us who I'm going to introduce in a moment. But first, I want to introduce my compadre, my co-host, Matthew Bergen. I'm Dabaco Alderson, if I forgot to introduce myself. Matt, how are you arriving to our session?
Thanks, Tobacco. I'm feeling good. I'm sitting here with a little bit of excitement and kind of some tingles going on in the next hour, feeling into that and get a bit excited. I feel like I've got my back supported. I've got a nice opportunity to stay connected. I've got Frida Kahlo here, but she's actually dropped off the camera, so that's okay. She was in the chair behind me. So I'm feeling good. Thank you.
Excellent. And I am arriving feeling very aware of my legs. I took myself for a first very gentle jog this morning in a long time. So I think I'll be feeling those muscles even more tomorrow, but feeling energized, feeling activated, really excited for today's conversation. So to introduce our special guest on the Gestalt Me Gently podcast today, we have someone who has been in the Gestalt therapy space with a good few decades of experience. She's an innovator. She has been the director of the institute that Matt and I have both had the pleasure of doing our Gestalt training in. She works in ecotherapy. I feel like there's many ways I can wax lyrically for our guest here, but let me just introduce you to Ash Power. Ash, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dabaco. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for the privilege and honour of joining your podcast and for that comprehensive introduction. It's quite sweet to sit here with you both, having been your trainer and seen your development over time. I'm excited for this new enterprise that you're offering, and I'm excited to be invited to talk with you today.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you. And like we did a little check-in to start off, I'm curious how you're arriving.
Yeah, with a sense of sweetness and a sense of excitement and a sense of warmth, both from this environment and also from having my little therapy dog Betty sitting on the side of my leg, which is keeping me physically warm.
We know Betty well.
Yeah,
Feeling
Betty.
Betty's energy in this moment.
Yes.
Pressing Betty.
Part of the intention of Matt and I doing this podcast is kind of looking at the ways that Gestalt and queerness can also overlap and intersect, and having both studied at TRIA, one of the things that really got me over the line to study there was it seemed to be really well aligned or supportive around queer folk and queer experience, and we weren't the only queer people studying while we were going through the institute as well. And I think that was a deciding factor in me, coming to TRIA opposed to maybe one of the other therapy institutes. I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about TRIA and its foundations, and why do you think it was a bit more of a queer friendly, safe space for expression? Because if if I kind of zoom out at the world of therapists and psychologists and all that field, it's a lot of, to stereotype and generalize, a lot of white middle-aged straight women, but there seems to be this wave of
Yeah.
queerness, and I identify as like a queer affirming therapist, and that seemed to marry so nicely with Tria. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say that this is bigger than Tree. I would say that one of the things about Gestalt therapy is as to why it is always been seen as something quite radical, a bit fringe, and inclusive, most importantly. And I think some of that goes back to its origins, not not particularly with Fritz and Laura, but more Paul Goodman. And so Paul Goodman was a anarchist, and a lot of his and I would say that Paul Goodman was queer. See, queer has become more of a terminology for people who have a range of sexual preference beyond the heteronormative paradigm. But I would say that the origins of the word queer actually were much more broad than that. And they were people who didn't actually fit into the dominant paradigm. They were seen as other, right? So Gestalt has never fit into the dominant paradigm. And so I would suggest that Gestalt, in and of its ethos and its character, is wonderfully queer. And so, and that in that it's constantly in a counterposition to the dominant paradigm. And if I go again to what I was saying about Paul Goodman, is that his perspective was agitating around being in opposition to the dominant paradigm, because the dominant paradigm was very individualistically focused. He was saying that, this created an enormous amount of isolation, separateness, and this individualistic construct was harmful to us. And so, right, so if we start to remember our interconnectedness and our interconnectedness to all things, to each other, but also to all of our ecosystems, really that could be said that's queer, because it's queer to the dominant paradigm. So I think, Gestalt's fringed, anarchistic inclusivity means that there is an open place for people who don't feel that they belong in the dominant paradigm. And I think that's one of the things that attracts people who might now identify through that lens of the word and the hermeneutics of queer now. And that there is a sense of openness, and there's not really a type. There's not a particular type or prescription about who a Gestalt therapist needs to be. It's very, very broad. And this comes again, from its origins and from a lot of the people who over the decades have continued to lead Gestalt therapy in different areas of the world, seem to maintain that broad sense of inclusivity. What do you reckon about that? How do you think does that land?
I love it. Thank you, Ash. No, just sitting here receiving all of that, and I just wanted to give you that space to kind of run with that, and I really appreciate that you did. And yeah, I totally concur. Look, I think it's a wonderful opportunity with the concept of queerness for inclusivity and to live outside of the major paradigms of heteronormativity, and to have the space to not name itself, but just to be free in that
Mm,
liberation of the
mm,
opportunities there to be to be a living experiment. And that to me is really exciting. I get really kind of like, oh wow, this is, you know, beyond the binaries. It's actually a reality that defies to be defined. And I love that freedom. That's to me is like its anarchistic origin. So I'm glad you kind of spoke to some of that, and Paul Goodman and you know, agitating in the opposition and stuff like that. That really resonated with me.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you know, mentioned Mark Fairfield and, you know, the work that the school, well, my diploma was, we did a subject around his impact on, you know, being of service to the community and agitating within the community, and yeah, building relationality with the community, you know, post HIV/AIDS, and how his body of work seems to really be driven by his trauma of that period, and how he kind of really in that beautiful way spoke to that as a way for him to create action in the world. And so that really impacted me, and how you know, those pieces around it, Gestalt, being able to hold and include the outsiders. So I felt really seen when we brought in Mark Fairfield's work at TRIA. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that to you, just so it was kind of heard, and just that gratitude that that you had, you know, taken that risk, and the huge impact of that. So I guess, yeah, that's just something I wanted to kind of label. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that, Matt. And, you know, I mean, Mark is an incredibly influential storyteller. And what he does through his storytelling is he does a lot of community organizing. And, you know, if you lean into some of Gordon Wheeler's work around complexity theory and um, some of his later writings that talking about how, you know, we are wired for empathy as humans. And so with you know, the community organizing that Mark brings in telling the story, there's a resonance. And so that's sort of the social organizing or social activism aspect of Gestalt therapy that has really been something that Mark, I think, has kept alive, certainly brought alive for us. And why we brought that into our program was that, you know, everybody's life has a particular story in it, that when we are able to look at what's important to us, what's part of our story, what's part of our passion, what's part of our history that resonates for others, how can that also lead to some positive social change? And, you know, that storytelling is a wonderful way to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, oh God, I'll bring myself in, but I did feel that I dropped a bomb on residential that time when I presented my spoken word piece around "Fuck the Shame Away," and that was directly out of that course that we had done with Mark, and just you know, reclaiming part of ourself, and being able to express that and express it without shame, and to live from a point of truth, and that really impacted me. And I just remember dropping it at Resi, and just seeing some certain faces, and yeah, I was just kind of curious how that landed for you that time. I don't know if you remember it, but yeah, if you
Oh,
care to
of
speak to that.
course. Can't remember what you're talking about,
No.
Matt. Look, I mean, Matt, you know, you're talking, you're giving an example of, you know, the residentials. It's an interesting thing in a Gestalt training program. The residentials of coming together for 3, 4 days, or sometimes some places longer, but coming into community offers an alternative way of being in, well, literally in community together. And there's a very unique quality that can come from a Gestalt residential, that people can have the opportunity not only to do work on their skills as developing practitioners, but work on themselves personally, but also to challenge and stretch as a community. And to bring in some of these principles that we're talking about inclusivity, about perhaps bringing in challenges for yourself in relationship with other that you might not have the opportunity to do elsewhere, and to be accepted and to be validated and seen in that. So your expressions, not just that one, but your various expressions over time, Matt, have been, a wonderful example of the opportunity for that and the liberation perhaps and the leadership that comes from those kinds of examples as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Absolutely. And yeah, no, look, it was a lot of fun. And I also was, on my little list here is like little questions that I'm going to ask Ash. And I was like, yeah, how did residentials come about being a thing? And what is behind them? And you kind of just gave some service to that. But yeah, there's kind of like it's a really bizarre experiment in a way because there's just so many different personalities and personality clashes and egos and stuff like that. And how that all gets housed and how you choose as to who's going to sleep with who in which room and stuff like that, or is it all just chaos and just kind of like
We don't.
Sounds like you're making these
We don't put
residentials
people
out to sound
sleeping
like
together.
some sort of orgy.
Yes,
Who's
we
gonna
have
sleep with
moved
who?
on. We have moved on from the some of the perhaps earlier days of the sexual expression and things like that.
oh,
We
was I missing out on that?
step back in time to Esalen.
Right.
I'm not quite sure where the residential tradition came from, to be honest, but it definitely has been something that has been a tradition as far back as I know. And
Right.
right, it is like a little bit of a social experiment that that seems to carry on. And Fritz did do lots of time together with groups and things like that at Esalen, and so perhaps some of it was a spin-off from there. I'm not quite sure.
Speaking of these residentials, another, you know, nothing like a no talent show evening to meet some new edges and experiment, but also another fond memory of those weekends was an opportunity to do ecotherapy. And you mentioned, Ash, in a earlier answer that you were talking about that, Gestalt ethos moving away from individualism and looking at the environment and all the fields that we are influenced by. I'm wondering, yeah, now could be a lovely time to just introduce ecotherapy because maybe for some of our listeners they don't even know what ecotherapy or nature-based therapy is and how that kind of weaves and marries with Gestalt.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tobacco. Um, so if I can circuit back just a little bit to the social activism and so and social change, that when we were considering how to most explicitly include um training that was to do with social activism, social change, we decided that actually ecotherapy was the most radical and the most impactful social change element of the training that we could include. And so, this came after, some time on, just before COVID with my dear colleague Gina O'Neill, when we went to Aotearoa and we learnt, from, uh, somebody who is deep in the ecotherapy and wilderness therapy from the Northern Hemisphere, Dave Talamo from Wilderness Reflections. And we spent 8 days in nature, working and learning this incredible dialoguing with nature and listening to nature. And so, what I think has happened over the last few years, and really in some ways, I think what happened with COVID is that in the lockdowns, people went outside a lot more and started to actually notice the natural world as something really resourceful, and I'm really grateful of the opportunity just to go for a walk outside.
True.
right? And what we've seen happen is that now every second person is interested in nature-based therapy or ecotherapy and wanting to take their work outside, which is fantastic.
Mm.
And I think, and so the relationship with Gestalt therapy is that, I mean, I think, globally we are at some kind of different place as a collective species that we are starting to pay a whole lot more attention to the natural world. And some of that may be because it's so threatened and therefore we are so threatened. Some of it could be, depends which rabbit hole you want to go down, whether it's astrology, whether it's collective consciousness, you choose any of them. But the point is, a lot more people are waking up to the potency and the support and the collaboration of nature. So, as ecotherapists or nature-based Gestalt therapists, what we have the opportunity to do is to apply the beautiful practice of Gestalt therapy, which is the phenomenological method, so our curiosity and our experience near method, our relational, the dialogical aspect. So, the what happens in the co-created in between of client and therapist, and of course the field influencing aspects of Gestalt therapy and experiment. All of these things just lend themselves wonderfully to working in a collaborative way with the natural world. And so in many ways, what this is doing is where, Gestalt therapy I think in the 90s became very, very focused on the therapeutic relationship. And some of the authors like Lynn Jacobs and Rich Heisner really focused a lot on that therapeutic in between, which was a wonderful influence from the intersubjective theories and so on. Um, and then what I think is happening more lately is this influence of nature-based therapy is now looking at nature as the co-therapist. So rather than just two humans doing therapy in nature, nature becomes the co-therapist. So there's actually a triad conversation that starts to unfold, as you would know because you both studied it as well. And the incredible insights and dialogue that can come from the natural world to resource us as humans is so benefic, so abundant, and so generous.
Mm.
And I don't know about you, but I constantly come out of those sessions feeling enlivened and refreshed and inspired and so much more expansive. So I think, it is now we're moving into a bit more of a paradigm of this, our relationship with the natural world is becoming more noted and more noticeable. And I'm super curious and excited to see how this really continues to unfold. I think in many ways it could save us.
Mm. Oh, beautiful answer. I feel really touched, particularly by that last line. There's a real sense of hope and curiosity. I know every time I do a nature-based therapy, ecotherapy session, I'm gifted and surprised and, yeah, like you say, inspired. Yeah, so I really recommend if, you're listening to this and there's some curiosity there, go seek out a therapist that can take you on a ecotherapy session and try it out. It's really something to experience rather than try and intellectualize.
That's it.
Mm.
And if you want to learn about it, then go to gestaltsydney.com.au because there's a little training
We
available.
love a very
Right.
smooth
Little
plug.
plug.
Don't worry, there'll be time for that at the end for a little bit more, but I love that you
Yeah.
got it in there already.
And I'm also curious around the evolution you've seen Gestalt have in Sydney or in Australia over the years, and the various institutions that have kind of come up and unfortunately disappeared. And yeah, your role opening up TRIA and the Relational Institute Australia, and just how that kind of came to be, and that desire that you had to, open and run a school and be a coach for the, the new generations. Can you share a little bit about that?
I'd love to. So I didn't actually have a desire to open an institute, Matt. So what happened was after I finished my Gestalt training that I just mentioned, a couple of years later, I was invited onto the faculty of what was then Gestalt Practitioners Training Sydney, which was owned by Mike Reid predominantly. And he also had some other directors, Judy Leong and Sally Brooks, at different times respectively. This was also at a time when there was Sydney Gestalt Institute, there was Terrigal Gestalt Institute, there was Northern Rivers Gestalt Institute, there was
Sounds like the golden age of Gestalt in Australia.
Yeah.
Wow.
This was in 2010. At that time that I was just mentioning, Gestalt Practitioners Training Sydney invited me onto the faculty. A few months into that, the directors decided that they wanted to actually step out and were talking about closing the institute down. And I just joined with a cohort as my first year of being a trainer. I loved it. I was so excited to be a Gestalt trainer, and I joined with this wonderful cohort, and then they were going to close it down. And we were already all in love with each other. And so myself and a colleague, she and I decided that we would take that over. We would take over Gestalt Practitioners Training Sydney. We would take over the students, and we decided that we would get them through their training because we had begun and we wanted to see them get through their training. I had no idea what I was putting my hand up for, but
Really?
no idea whatsoever. But
Mm.
I knew that I wanted to get those students through their training, and I wanted to see that Gestalt continue because I loved it. A few months in, it really started to hit home what we had taken on and what a big project it was. What we also started to notice, though, during that chapter is that there were quite a lot of students that were inquiring about our program, or sorry, potential students inquiring about the program that already had a AQF qualification in counselling, such as a graduate diploma or a master's or something like that in counselling, and they weren't necessarily wanting another higher education qualification. They wanted to learn Gestalt therapy, and they were attracted to Gestalt therapy because of its experiential nature, because of the relational aspect of it that I mentioned that I was attracted to, because of its body inclusive approach, and its just dynamic reputation. So we then decided, we at that point in time being Forrest James and I, because he was also one of the directors of Brisbane, and we decided at that point to rebrand as the Relational Institute Australia, and we decided to offer a shorter course, which we thought serviced that gap in the market of experiential Gestalt, very skills-oriented, very dynamic training for people who already had that undergraduate qualification in counselling. The name, the Relational Institute, also came from our very strong alignment with the Relational Centre and the work of Mark Fairfield. We had spent a number of years really getting to know him and his work, and he had influenced us significantly. And I'll just to say that, because some people think that the hermeneutics of that word relational mean that we're really good at relationship. But one of the things that Mark's emphasis in that word is the interconnected relationality of all. And it was then that we started to also become aware of that being other than human, and that in actual fact, we started to come into relationship with some kind of, would it be questioning or just curiosity around how Gestalt therapy was also responding to what was happening from a global perspective and the global challenges that we were starting to see more and more happening over lots and lots of different ecosystems. So our integration of relational really was profiling that we were no longer just focusing on the relationship between two humans in the therapeutic dyad. We were actually starting to really focus on our whole relationship with our ecosystems as community, as social structures, as environment, as well as other humans. And so this then we really started to bring in a lot of interest in social change and social activism within that 2-year training program that we were offering through the Relational Institute Australia.
It was interesting. Yesterday, I was writing myself notes about what to ask Ash, and I had my mobile phone on recording notes, and it does that opportunity where it translates like a spelling translator, sorry, a voice translator, and literally I walked past a crow who was having a good old song, and it translated in my notes as ha 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 ha, and that was the crow singing, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like the phone is able to interpret nature's call there. And I thought,
Yeah.
I wonder what that question is that Crow's wanting to ask Ash about the future there, or about nature therapy. Is there anything there, Ash, you have to share about what Crow is sending as a message to you?
I love that. And I love that, because you gave me a little preempt about on the Gestalt Sydney website, we have a picture of it's actually magpie.
Magpie, right?
Yeah, yeah. And magpie and tree. And so, when we talk about a collective, well, we now know that magpie, crow, tree, as well as human, canine, like these are all part of the collective. And so that's what that's what we are embracing, and that's what we're profiling is, the connectedness, and that we're really inviting I am really inviting people to join me in not seeing humans as the top of the chain anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and to shift some of that colonizing hierarchy, which sees humans as the most powerful beings on the planet. And that's again something about, like, let's change our perspective in the interest of potentially in the interest of our own special salvation. So I don't know about Crow saying ha 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 ha. I'm not quite sure, but I do know that when I go to nature and deepen my relationship with nature as both a nature therapist and just somebody who's now really learning from nature a lot. I take a lot of my questions and conversations into nature about, well, where we are at as a conundrum. Sorry, where we are at as humans and our conundrum around that, and where I am in that process as well. And so for me, nature has kind of become my coach, and nature has become my therapist and my counsel and my guidance. And I know that sometimes when I go for just to my sit spot, I might go, and a sit spot is just somewhere that, you go on a regular basis through all different seasons and notice who lives there and learn to listen and be with nature. That nature just keeps on shifting something in me that reminds me of other than human, and again, the deep collaboration that nature wants to be in with us as humans.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. I and I feel at this point in time, I just need to also speak to, Indigenous culture as well, and just how lucky we are in Australia on this ancient, ancient land, and having that opportunity to be held by some of those ancient teachings and awareness around, the sacredness of Australia, and that to me, ecotherapy is that remembering and that tapping into that exists within, the ancient culture, and that harmony that exists between land and environment and creature. I'll call human beings creatures for now to make my
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
And it's, yeah, that real kind of connection to bring human
we
beings
belong.
back to
Yeah, we
bring.
belong to the land. The land does not belong to us. We belong to
Correct.
place does not belong to us. And that's the shift, Matt. That's what I'm saying about there's something that's really shifting that I'm noticing as well when we're starting to show up to this conversation with the natural world more. That as we listen more, there's this shift taking place that we're starting to realize our place with place that Indigenous people of Australia and other Indigenous nations, no doubt as well, all collectively have spoken about and assumed and just held as truth
Mm.
for the longest of times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that adage, deep listening to Deary, was, such a kind of game changer for me, of just like, well, what's it like to go and sit with the river? What's it like to go and look at algae and sit with algae? I just remember down on my knees, just looking into these little microcosms within microcosms, of just being so drawn to this incredible, beauty
Yeah.
that exists, and intelligence that exists in nature. So yeah, it's wonderful to share
Intelligence
these.
and I'll just to underscore the support and collaboration, because I think colonization has made us think that nature is also something to be fearful,
Hmm.
whereas, the increasing movement of what rewilding and,
Mm.
how many episodes and series all over the world of that TV show alone, and the
Hmm.
popularity of all of that. And as Eva Angofra said on Alone Series 3, nature's always got your back.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, Ash, this shift of moving, more towards nature, and perhaps nature can save us or guide us. Speaking of shifts and changes, you've mentioned Gestalt Sydney, and like I said in the intro, you are this visionary innovator entrepreneur. You're
Mhm.
constantly birthing new projects and ideas, and I just feel like it might be a nice time to also talk about the shifts and the changes in the Gestalt
Mm,
landscape here in Sydney. So, what
sure.
has become of Tria, and now what you're stepping into with Gestalt Sydney as well. I'd love to hear from you about
Yeah.
that change.
Yep, sure. Um, so, look, so with the increasing changes in the counselling sector, with the Albanese government starting this initiative of the national standards for counsellors and psychotherapists, which is a great initiative. it's about time that counselling started to be noted equally alongside psychologists, because that's something that certainly the industry was particularly impacted by the decision to grant the Better Access Scheme Medicare rebate to psychologists and not counsellors. And so the counselling profession over the last, that was 2006, so the last 20 years, the counselling profession has been, and particularly obviously by the federal body of PACFA, have been working towards government recognition as a health force, allied health force, with equivalent recognition of psychology, and particularly with the increasing demands of mental health. So with that, the formalisation of qualifications for counsellors and psychotherapists, but more of counsellors, has become increasingly rigorous. And so TRIA went through a phase of rising up to meet some of those standards in its accreditation process and so on, and was successful in meeting those standards. But I guess when we circle back to some of those conversations we were having earlier on about the radicalization of Gestalt and the anarchism of Gestalt, and it's not to say that Gestalt is in opposition to those government requirements, but it's something very hard to reconcile.
Mm.
And so, a lot of the requirements for academic rigor and for particular emphasis of competencies for industry and so on are a framework that is just hard to kind of fit with the really experiential, organic, um,
Somatic.
all of these, wonderful sort of organic things that we've been talking about that we all love about Gestalt, and sort of fitting them into that government framework. And so I think the faculty of TRIA and I, came to a place of a decision about whether we would continue pursuing that. And we're all, collective practitioners of a number of decades of being Gestalt therapists. And, I had the Institute in some form or another for 15 years. And here we are talking about this possible new paradigm that we're in. And I guess I'm still in a questionable wonder about what this does mean for psychotherapy, because the national standards are very focused on counselling. There is the College of Psychotherapy is starting to profile within PACFA, and so there's a lot of changes still operating and growing and emerging in the industry. The thing that I feel really clear about is maintaining my love and relationship with Gestalt therapy,
Mm.
and that is something that feels most alive for me when I am able to teach it through its own style of delivery. It's not necessarily something that needs to be assessed in a particular way, or not something that needs to be um, delivered in a particular way that meets those frameworks that are required by those big regulators. I think we have enough of them. I think we have a lot of them in Australia. And so I think we sort of came back to a place of wanting to really just continue offering Gestalt and nature-based Gestalt particularly as well, in a way that continues to enliven us and those that join us in that delivery, because we never stop learning.
Mm.
we all learn together. And so we just decided that through this new lens of Gestalt Sydney, it breathed some fresh new life, and the brand itself has a, a very green, nature oriented flavor. So it does really suggest that we're very enthusiastic about the nature-based Gestalt therapy leaning. In particular, as I was saying before, as our position or our stance towards social change.
Yeah, I was just feeling into lots of things there. So thanks for that wonderful share. The changing nature of closing one door, opening another, and the excitement that comes with that. And so, just for anyone that might be listening, is Gestalt Sydney an opportunity for people to come and mostly do upgrades that already have either counselling or psychotherapy in the background, or can a complete novice come and start learning about ecotherapy? Because it's really exciting to hear you talk about it.
We can teach anybody a framework for talking with nature.
Hmm.
Like if people want to join us in a framework that, the framework that we use is a combination that comes from rites of passage, and it's not something that we um, own. So we're definitely keen to just invite people to come along and learn about ecotherapy.
Right, fantastic. Okay.
Um, And if people also want to learn about, how to do Gestalt therapy, and they're a counselor or a social worker, whichever, they want to learn nature informed or nature based Gestalt therapy, then that's what we're really enthusiastic to add to their skill repertoire as well.
Beautiful. I feel like this is a lovely moment for any other plugs that you want to give of things that might be coming up on the calendar at Gestalt Sydney, and how people can find out a bit more information if they're
Oh,
if they're
thanks, Dabaco.
curious.
Yeah, there's quite a few nature oriented opportunities on there. There is paradoxically an online training. But just to kind of meet that's the world that we're in. But there's a very short and quite affordable online training in nature-based or ecotherapy. It's just a lovely introduction. So people can jump on and do that in a self-paced way. And that can also lead to doing some live session work as well. That can then lead to there's a weekend nature-based Gestalt therapy training in residential setting in October. Then for people who've already done ecotherapy foundational training, we've got this wonderful immersion coming up next February, where we have our mentor and colleague Dave Talamo joining us from the Northern Hemisphere to come and work with us on Australian country, both up in Bundjalung country and in Darkinjung country. So more info about that on there. And we also have the professional training in Gestalt therapy that's starting at the end of the July for people who already have their undergraduate in counselling and want to learn Gestalt therapy in that experiential way that I was saying. And just to sneak in alongside all of that, there is a 2-day professional training on Gestalt therapy and psychedelic integration, which is a whole other framework that's really becoming very popular now. So, how to respond to clients who are working with psychedelics, and how to support people who might be having bad trips or, challenging experiences with the psychedelic world that is really in its own next renaissance.
Another exciting frontier. I feel like that is another podcast ep in
Exactly.
the
That's
works
one
in
to talk to
itself.
Forrest about. That's one to talk to Forrest about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
would love to get Forrest on.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for that exciting, comprehensive list of all the things that Gestalt Sydney's offering. It's gestaltsydney.com.au for people that are wanting some more information about that. I feel like we're coming towards the end of our time, Ash, but before we say farewell, was there any other things that you wanted to mention, or if people are curious about knowing more about you, are you taking on clients as a therapist? Like what's the world of Ash Power looking like right now?
Thanks, Tobacco. because I am in a bit of a transition, yeah, I'm open to taking on new clients. My practice is open again. It hasn't been for about 8 years. So my practice is open again. And I'm particularly interested to work with people who may be wanting to work with nature as the co-therapist. And that can be done either remotely via Zoom or in person around the Sydney Basin. And so my contact is through gestaltsydney.com.au. And we are also offering a group as well. I should have mentioned that too, for people who are interested in just doing some Gestalt group work. That's also available on there. Other than that, I just want to say how lovely it's been to talk with you both. And, it's so great that you're doing this. And it's just wonderful to see people's own enthusiasm and ideas and love for Gestalt popping up and leading things, and how Gestalt just continues to advance. And it's so great that you're doing it. And I've loved talking with you both.
It's
Oh,
been a real
thank you.
honor to have you on as a guest, Ash. And yeah, thank you for all the great work that you've done holding the pillars of Gestalt here in Sydney. I'm deeply grateful to have gone on this journey with Tria when it was in the form that it was. And yeah, I'm really excited for where this Gestalt wave is gonna take us all.
Yeah. Good to
Mm.
be on the wave with you. Good to be on the ride with you.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you too, Ash. Thanks for an amazing 4 years. I think I was involved with Tria, and that opportunity to go to really deep relational places and personal spaces and connection with others. And the learning curve has been really phenomenal. And I know I'm a different person and I relate differently and I feel the world differently. And that's because of Gestalt and my experience at your school. So I just want to say thank you for being a bricks and mortar holder to a space that was pretty radical. And I love I love when we were closing it down that you're literally throwing the books in my lap, just saying, take this, read this, have this, have this, have this. And then in our Gestalt group, we had more boxes of books to give away. So I feel like it's, Tria continues. It's, students have, that old library now in their library at home and stuff. So, the messaging, the teaching continues on from here. So
Well, yeah, the lineage of Gestalt in Sydney continues to live on, and
yeah,
in another incarnation.
absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you. Thanks for everything. Much appreciated.
What a beautiful place to land. Thank you both.
Thank you both.
All right, take care. This has been Gestalt Me Gently.
Gestalt You
See
Gently.
you on the next episode. All
Yeah,
right,
lovely.
take care.
Ciao.
Thank